Welcome back to the deep dive. We're continuing our journey through the MPP, the Manual of Patent Examining Procedure.
Yep, the essential guide for anyone dealing with patent examination at the USPTO.
It really is. It maps out all the rules, the procedures, basically how things get done.
Exactly. And today we're jumping into a really critical part of Chapter 2100, which covers patentability.
Right. Specifically, we're looking at Section 2175.
2175. That's all about the form paragraphs used for rejections based on claim clarity, or rather, lack thereof.
Specifically under 35 U.S.C. 112b, or, the old Pre-AIA 112 second paragraph.
That's the one. The section of the law that demands claims particularly point out and distinctly claim the invention.
It sounds simple, but wow, getting it right is key.
It really is. It's about defining the scope, the actual boundaries of the patent protection, the meets and bounds, as they say.
Without that clear definition, the whole system kind of struggles, doesn't it? For examiners, for the public.
Absolutely. And that's what this deep dive is about. We want to understand how the USPTO uses these standardized bits of language, these form paragraphs,
To signal problems with claim clarity.
exactly why they use them, what specific problems they point to, and why getting this clarity right is so vital, not just for, passing the patent bar, but for actually getting strong, enforceable patents.
It's fundamental. Okay, so let's start with that statutory basis, 35 U.S.C. 112b. Why is this clear and precise requirement so central?
Well, think about it. A patent grants exclusive rights. It stops others from making, using, or selling the invention.
Right, it's a powerful right.
It is. And in return for that exclusivity, the inventor has an obligation. They have to tell the public very clearly what territory is off limits.
So if the claims are fuzzy or vague,
Then competitors don't know what they can safely work on, and examiners can't properly compare the invention to the prior art to see if it's actually new and non-obvious.
okay. So it's about public notice, defining the invention for the examiner, everything.
Precisely. It ensures fairness and workability. And the main tool examiners use to enforce this, day to day, are these form paragraphs listed in MPP 2175.
Form paragraphs, they sound bureaucratic, but important.
They are definitely important. Think of them as pre-written explanations for common rejection reasons. They ensure consistency.
So instead of writing out the same reasoning over and over,
The examiner can select the appropriate form paragraph. It cites the law, the MPP section, and clearly states the specific type of definiteness problem. MPP 2175 gathers the ones for 112B issues.
got it, standardized communication for specific flaws, like labels for common mistakes.
That's a good way to put it. It helps streamline things. So MPP 2175 walks through common issues. Let's maybe look at a few specific examples.
Yeah, let's do that. The source mentioned terms of degree. What's that about?
Right, terms like substantially, about, relatively. You see these all the time in claims.
I do. They seem useful for capturing variations.
They can be, but they can also make a claim indefinite if you're not careful. This is where form paragraph 7.34.01 often comes in.
Okay, so what's the problem with using about?
The problem arises when the specification, the written description part of the patent, doesn't give you a clear, objective way to measure what about means in that context.
So like if you just say about 100 degrees Celsius and leave it at that.
Exactly. Is that 99 to 101, 95 to 105, 90 to 110? Without guidance in the specification, like saying about 100 means 100 plus minus 5 degrees, the scope is uncertain. It's subjective.
And that uncertainty leads to an indefiniteness rejection using FP 7.34.01.
Correct, because neither the examiner nor the public knows precisely where the line is drawn.
Okay. What about relative terminology? That sounds similar. It's covered by form paragraph 7.34.03, right?
Very similar concept, yes. This covers words like large, small, strong, thin, efficient.
Also words you hear all the time.
And again, they're fine in normal conversation, but in a patent claim, they need an objective anchor. What does large mean?
It depends entirely on the context. A large transistor is tiny compared to a large building.
Precisely. So unless the specification provides a standard for comparison, large relative to component X, or strong enough to withstand Y force, or efficient meaning achieving Z result, the term is just floating, undefined.
And boom, FP 7.34.03 comes out.
You got it. The examiner needs an objective, measurable boundary.
Okay, here's one that sounds confusing. Conflicting limitations.
Yep.
That's form paragraph 7.34.04. How does a claim contradict itself?
It seems weird, but it happens. Usually it's within a single claim element or phrase. You might define something broadly and then in the same breath add a limitation that clashes with the broader definition.
Can you give an example?
Maybe something like a structure comprising a layer having a thickness between 10 and 50 nanometers, wherein said layer has a thickness of less than 5 nanometers.
Okay, yeah, that just doesn't compute. It's inherently contradictory.
Right. It creates total confusion about what is actually being claimed. Is it 1050 millimeters or less than 5 millimeter? FP 7.34.04 flags that kind of internal inconsistency.
Makes sense. Now, this next one feels like basic grammar, but I bet it trips people up. Lack of antecedent basis.
Yeah.
Form paragraph 7.34.05.
Oh, absolutely. This is probably one of the most common, almost mechanical rejections you see, especially early on.
So what is it exactly?
It's when you use a definite article like the or said to refer to an element, but you haven't introduced that element earlier in the claim using an indefinite article like a or an.
Like jumping straight to the widget without first mentioning a widget.
Exactly that. Or maybe you introduced a first widget and a second widget, and then later you just say the widget.
Which one?
Right. It's ambiguous. The reader, whether it's the examiner or the public, doesn't know which element you're referring back to. It muddies the claim structure. FP 7.34.05 points this out clearly.
Seems straightforward to fix, but crucial for clarity.
Very. Then we get into issues where the claim itself seems incomplete, like it's missing something essential.
Right, the omitted essential element step structural relationships. That sounds more serious. Covered by FPA 7.34.12 through 7.34.14.
It often is more serious. These rejections happen when the claim leaves out a part, a step, or a connection that's necessary for the invention to actually function or be complete as described.
So if you claim a three-legged stool but only mention two legs.
Kind of, yeah. Or maybe a chemical process claim that describes mixing reactants A and B, but completely omits the essential heating step that the specification says is required for the reaction to even happen.
So the claim, as written, doesn't actually describe an operable invention.
Correct. It fails to particularly point out and distinctly claim the operative subject matter the inventor regards as the invention because a necessary piece is missing from the claim itself.
Okay, so these form paragraphs give examiners a precise toolkit for these 112B issues. But how does this fit into the bigger picture of interpreting claims? MPP 2100 talks about claim construction, right?
It does, and that's crucial context. Claims aren't read in a vacuum. They're interpreted using the broadest reasonable interpretation, or BRI standard, during examination.
Broadest reasonable interpretation.
But importantly, in light of the specification, the spec acts like a dictionary for the claims. It defines terms, provides context, explains how the invention works.
So going back to about 100 degrees, if the spec clearly defines that range, it might be okay.
It very well could be, yes. If the specification provides that objective boundary, the term isn't indefinite anymore. The BRI must be consistent with the specification's teachings.
And MA2 2100 also links this definiteness requirement to mean war, means plus function claims. How does that work?
Yes, under 112F, or the Pre-AIA 6th paragraph. This is a really interesting connection. You can claim an element as means for performing a certain function.
Like means for fastening.
Exactly. But the law says if you do that, your specification must describe the specific structure, material, or acts that perform that function.
And if you don't describe the structure adequately in the specification,
then, crucially, the claim gets rejected under 112B, the definiteness paragraph, not just 112A for lack of written description.
wait, why 112B?
Because, as courts like the Federal Circuit have explained, if the specification doesn't disclose the structure corresponding to the means, then the claim fails to particularly point out and distinctly claim the invention. The scope of the means is unclear because you haven't defined what it actually is structurally.
Wow, okay, so the lack of disclosure in the spec directly makes the claim indefinite.
Precisely. It shows how tightly linked disclosure and claim definiteness can be, especially in the means plus function context.
And it's important to remember, as the MPP points out, that definiteness, 112B, is a separate issue from, say, written description or enablement under 112A.
Absolutely separate requirements. You can have a crystal clear claim, passes 112B, that isn't adequately described or enabled by the spec, fails 112A, or vice versa, though often issues travel together. They're distinct legal hurdles.
It's also interesting just how systemic these form paragraphs are. MPP 2175 focuses on 112B, but they're used everywhere, right? Like in Chapter 900.
That's right. MPP Chapter 900 is sort of the master list. You find form paragraphs for everything prior art rejections under 102 or 103.
Like 7.15.02.AIA for an AIA 102 rejection.
Exactly. Or even simpler things like objections to drawings, maybe missing reference numerals, that's FP 6.22.07, or issues with priority claims like FP 2.22.
So using them for 112B and 2175 isn't unique. It's just applying this standard USPTO communication method to this specific area of patent law.
Precisely. It leverages an existing structured system to ensure consistent and clear communication about why a claim is deemed indefinite.
Okay, pulling this all together, why should you, our listener, really care about the nitty-gritty of MPP 2175 in these specific form paragraphs?
Well, if you're drafting patent applications, knowing these common pitfalls, vague terms, missing antecedents, omitted steps is absolutely essential. It helps you write clearer claims from the outset.
Which means potentially smoother prosecution, fewer rejections.
Fewer rejections, less cost, less delay. And if you're studying for the patent bar, recognizing these form paragraph numbers and the issues they represent is critical for analyzing fact patterns and responding correctly.
And even beyond that, if you're involved in licensing or enforcing a patent,
the clarity of those claims is everything. An indefinite claim is vulnerable to challenge in court. It can be invalidated, potentially wiping out the patent's value.
So understanding definiteness isn't just about navigating the USPTO. It's about the fundamental strength and enforceability of the patent itself.
Absolutely. Clarity isn't optional. It's a core requirement. And MPP 2175, with its form paragraphs, provides the structured way examiners enforce that requirement, ensuring claims do their job of distinctly defining the invention for the public.
A crucial piece of the patent puzzle.
Couldn't have said it better.
We'd like to extend a special thank you to Mike Shepard, the creative director who organized this project.
And now, just a brief but important disclaimer.
Disclaimer. This summary of the MPEP was generated using AI tools, including ChatGPT and NotebookLM, and may contain errors or omissions. It is provided for general educational and informational purposes only, and is not legal advice or a substitute for formal instruction.
For authoritative guidance, consult the official MPEP, a qualified instructor, or a registered patent practitioner.
Okay, and before we wrap up, a final thought to chew on. We've talked about the need for claims to distinctly point out the invention using language. So here's a question. As technology gets more complex, and even language itself evolves, how does that create ongoing challenges for meeting this clarity requirement?
That's a great question. How might our understanding or the legal interpretation of what it means to distinctly claim need to adapt over time, especially for cutting-edge fields?
Something to think about. Thank you for listening, and we hope you'll continue with us as we explore the remaining sections of Chapter 2100 and beyond in the MPEP.